Hello. And in respect to the film we watched, Misunderstood Minds, and the first person perspective of the children going through the experience of learning disabilities, I I have seen a little bit outside, but in respect to specifically to the film, I'll talk about Nathan first. And the question was, what does the student say about themselves? How has their LD affected their self-esteem? So I saw that Nathan Nathan was a very well articulated boy. He had good communication skills. He had issues with phonemic awareness, and he felt really frustrated, as he mentioned in the film, in Misunderstood Minds. It's just hard. You keep trying and trying, you just get tired of doing it. And I felt the pain and the frustration of the child and how much it impacts their self-esteem. It's not the problem, it's the emotional toll that it takes on those children because they are not properly diagnosed and they are not provided with the right tools to deal with those disabilities. And it is the responsibility of the adults, it's not on those children. So going back to the film, he had to repeat the first grade as per school suggestion. But as his father mentioned in the film Misunderstood Minds, that when people asked Nathan, "How old are you?" he would say, "I'm in grade 2," when he was still in grade 1, because he had to repeat the grade 1. It's such a sad reality. And as for the question, how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family? So for Nathan's family, it was not easy raising a child with learning disability, especially when they don't know what's going on with their own child. Mom felt sad, and she said in the film that it stings to know that your child is not average or exceptional, but he has learning disabilities. And how can you put your child in a classroom? He's going to fail. The system is going to fail that child. And there's nothing that seems to help. But as we witnessed in Nathan's case, that the mom advocated for him, and she was able to get Nathan accommodations like dictating instead of writing his answers. And it worked very well in his favor, and he was very happy. His confidence improved. How do their experience relate to the simulation exercise in modules 3, 4, 5 through your child's eyes from our course? From the simulation exercise from module 4, I can relate Nathan's experience with Jade's experience. It was hurting, it was painful to see that the helplessness in Jade's eyes. She was such a bright, cute girl, and she was helpless. And I could relate it to Nathan's experience. That's how he must have felt too. And just because the brain is wired differently, the children don't deserve it. The children need the right support, the right accommodation, and the right diagnosis. And our system needs to work harder to provide them those accommodations. Talk about Lauren. She has executive functioning issues. And as for the question, what does the student say about themselves? How has their learning disability affected their self-esteem? I have a quote from the movie, Misunderstood Minds. "I was doing things wrong, and that's what people were telling me at school, that I was dumb and I don't do anything correctly." And it was like how much that child feels that I'm always wrong and I don't know how to do anything. although that wasn't the case. And another quote from the movie, Lauren got picked on at a school. Student tease her because she gets emotional easily. And again, why is she getting emotional? Because her cup is full to the brim. Of course she's going to react. She feels tired and frustrated all the time. And another quote from the movie, when somebody asked her, what is it like to not have friends? And she said, not fun at all. Not fun because if you do not have any friends, then you start thinking, what's the point of life when you do not have any friends? And it was painful to see and think that child, they deserve happiness, they deserve to see that everything is good and safe. And she feels that she doesn't have friends and nobody understands her, and she cannot keep up with the work. She has issues with organizing, and we have studied a lot about executive functioning issues. But to see it from that child's point of view and how she feels helpless and painful, and how there's nothing she can do about it, it's not in her hand, it was painful. And I feel like as an EA, I have worked with some of the children, and I hope to work in the future as well. And I would personally want to help them feel understood. And of course, we have to provide accommodations and help them however we can. And the question, how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family? Her parents were concerned. They took her to so many places and they were concerned parents. And when the doctor suggested that she should be on medication, how her father was concerned and how it breaks his heart to see his little girl. It's not easy, and it you need overall support from the system, from the parents. It's a combined work, and they should not feel that they are not being supported or their child is not being supported. But I saw and felt that how painful and troubling it was for the parents to see such a young child and how he was reluctant to put her on medication. I would have felt the same. It's a hard pill to swallow, but they saw improvements when finally, after even trying another school, it didn't work for long, and then they put her on medication. So it helped her, and that's what we need to promote more, like that. Yes, there are a few things that can be tried to help the child. The question was, how do their experience relate to the simulation exercises? I could relate her case with the case of Scott. He had executive functioning issues, and he was such a cute, adorable child. And the way he expressed disorganizing things and how he couldn't find his folder, and that's why he's always late to do things. And the way I did the exercise, and I'm trying to catch those squares, and I just couldn't. No matter how hard I try, it wasn't the lack of motivation or it wasn't the lack of skills, just couldn't. And it was really an experience to understand those children, what they go through. And I hope I'll be a better person to know these experiences and feel those frustrated moments. Another child we saw in the film, Misunderstood Mind, was Sarah Lee, and she has comprehension issues. And there was a quote from the movie Misunderstood Mind. When in class, my teacher asked us what is this? And I know my answer, but when I try to say it, it won't come out the way I was thinking of it. So she has it, she understands, but expressive language, she just cannot put it out properly. Her output was weak. And There was another quote from the movie: sometimes we will laugh and mumble the right answer under their breath. It's it's troubling, and it's not easy for those children to face all this at such a young age and go through all this pain and feel different, that they are not like every other child around them. So the how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family. So her mom mentioned that her ultimate goal is to go forward in life, and she expects her children to complete their education and go do well in academically, and then eventually in life, and how her siblings are doing well, and how she feels that Sarah is not making up the mark. And it's not easy to understand sometimes, but the parent needs to see that too. Like it's not an easy thing to accept that yes, my child has some weaknesses and he or she may need some additional help or some different kind of help, some different kind of resources. We moved on to the case of Adam Dennings in the movie Misunderstood Minds. And as for the question, what does the student say about themselves? How has their LD affected their self-esteem? Adam said in the movie, there is a quote from the movie: I felt embarrassed. Sometimes I'll pronounce a word and other kids pronounce the word for me. They'll say, hurry up, you don't know how to read. And I saw that and I put myself in that place. And if somebody does that to me in class, I may never be able to raise my hand to read in class ever again, because it's painful to go through that experience when you're young. When we are older, it's different. We learn to deal with the world. It's a different time. But being young and at that spot, it was not easy for him. Question of how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family? I felt that Adam Dunning's family suffered a lot of pain and suffering. And her mother said in the movie, in the film, Misunderstood Mind, school teachers kept saying he's just lazy. His personality is not there. And tested, his parents were really worried. And when he got tested, they came to know that he was reading at the third grade level when he was in grade 7. And it's 3 years were lost of his life without any identification or any support for him. And I also saw that in the film Misunderstood Minds, the clinical psychologist mentioned the quote from the movie: by the time he got to 9th grade, he was getting no special education help, and he was at a distinct disadvantage. He fell apart. He stopped going to class. He stopped doing his homework because it was way beyond he could do. And Adam said in a quote, I can't take this anymore. Because imagine a child, he's just can't handle the level and he's being put in class with others. And at that ripe age, grade 9, it's so unfair to that child. And we also witnessed the result of that frustration. He turned to drugs, and he was arrested for breaking and entering, and he had to go into child prison. It was all for that misdiagnosis, that the lack of help for that child who deserved more. And as for the simulation exercise, how do their experience relate to the simulation exercises? I related Adam's case to Jade and how she just couldn't read and couldn't progress. It was how she was teased in class. I could relate them together, and I felt pain, and I felt that this is frustrating to the point where I don't know if I was going through that, I don't know how I would have survived that. All I can think was like, how can I make a difference? How can I try to limit those experiences from spreading? And last but not the least, we had the case of Nathan Sertz. He was a 10-year-old brilliant boy who loves science, and but he cannot succeed in his school. And father mentioned signs of discipline problems, which was totally a misunderstood diagnosis or misunderstood label for that child. And eventually he was diagnosed with ADD without hyperactivity. And his parents mentioned that medicine helped a little while, but they were still having trouble, so they stopped it. And as for the question of what does the student say about themselves, how has their LD impacted their self-esteem, I have a quote from the movie from the film Misunderstood Minds. He was sad that he was unable to learn, that people didn't like him. He hated everything. He didn't want to learn, didn't want to write. I just shouldn't be alive. And that's how that 10-year-old young boy felt, that he shouldn't be alive. Nobody should feel this way. His self-esteem is so low that he's thinking of life like this, that sometimes I just kind of stop trying and then just stay in my bed. And yeah, when you don't know what's going on with your life and why are you not like everybody else around you, it's hard on a 10-year-old boy. The question of how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family? Yes, his family went into debt for one thing, because her mom's thought that maybe cadet will be a help. So she spent all his college funds, and they were worried it impacted the family financially and emotionally, which we see that all 5 cases. Obviously, yes, the family is impacted, but it's so that's why we need more support in the school system from the government. There should be more things that help support those families and parents and those children. And last but not the least, Nathan Sutz. He was a 10-year-old boy. He's a brilliant boy who loved science, and he was diagnosed with ADD without hyperactivity. And as for the question of what does the student say about themselves, how has their LD affected their self-esteem? He was sad that he was unable to learn, that people didn't like him. He hated everything. He didn't want to learn. He didn't want to write. And as the quote in the film, Misunderstood Minds, mentions, he says, I shouldn't be alive. This child does not have to go through this. This is so unfair that that boy, he's going through so much pain and trouble and being misunderstood. And how has raising a child with an LD impacted the family? His family suffered a lot of emotional and financial trouble, and they had to take money and support from their parents and use the college funding of their child. It was not easy for them, and raising a child with a learning disability, it's not often easy. And as an EA and as a member of the society, we should understand that and support those people and their kids. How does it relate to the experience to this experience to the simulation exercises? It's been an eye-opener. The last person we saw in the those videos was Sam, and Sam's story was heartbreaking. I related to Sam's story and I felt so bad. Like, it's an eye opener in a way because we do see and understand that, but not to this extent.